Oké.
Ik zal het boek in beeld laten zien en intro nog eens doen. Alright, welcome back everybody to episode 7 of Error Correcting Erik, where in each week we go through a chapter of David Deutsch, the beginning of infinity. So last week we spoke about universality, and this week we're going to talk about artificial creativity. So it's chapter 7, and the chapter is also titled Artificial Creativity. And what's really interesting about this chapter, that it talks about Alan Turing. That's how it starts, like the founding father of the modern computer, so to say.
Right.
And what's really interesting, because everybody knows that computers have been around since like Second World War, that they started in the early 30s and in the 50s. But what not a lot of people know is that they already started to talk about and to philosophize, to talk about the philosophy of artificial intelligence from that time period.
Right.
So of course nowadays, 2024, artificial intelligence is a hot topic.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about it. It's everywhere. We're talking about the philosophical implications. Not the could we do it, but the should we do it. But what not a lot of people know is that the discussion goes back to the 1950s.
Right.
And that's really interesting. And it's one of the important questions that Alan Turing had in mind is, can a machine think?
Right.
So what's your take on that? Let's start with that.
I mean, I think the philosophical implications of, can other, beings or creatures or things think predates obviously Turing, but I think he did kind of get the crux of it very specific, because he was able obviously to create a computer, right? And by I think logical, I would say, inference, he came to the conclusion that, hey, hold on, actually this thing should be able to to think in principle, right?
Yeah.
Which speaks a little bit to the computational universality and understanding what computation is within the context of thinking. Like we are thinking beings and thinking creatures, and what we are doing is computing things. We don't understand yet how we compute these things. I'm sure we'll get into those things later, but what I found most striking about this chapter was the the word AI has a little bit been stolen now by the marketing and people of the world in ChatGPT, where people start looking at artificial intelligence more as like a very sophisticated automated model of computation. But initially AI in its original form was meant to speak about people, persons, as Deutsch says in his book, and people like us, which are persons that are universal explainers. But because that's been kind of, I don't want to say stolen in a derogatory way, but kind of been used in a different sense in modern history, and just kind of how it's used in culture right now. So AGI is now the new way of describing what a human or a personhood type of thinking represents. So I found it philosophically interesting, because I also previously was in this mode of thinking. Ironically, the universal explainer is able to think itself into thinking it's doing something else, which speaks to our universality. But what I found most profound was how theory comes first before programming it. And one of the things that Deutsch, I believe, says is, if you can't program it, you haven't understood it.
Yeah.
So I hope that was my kind of take on let's say my highlights.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There's one thing specifically that I would like to dive into, that when indeed we talk today with all of the AI models that are out there today, that a lot of people are using in their daily lives, especially work related, that we use the term AI to refer to a complex automated model,
Right.
an AI that can create art, that can create language, that can translate things. But in the early days, when they talked about AI, when they started to talk about it in the 1950s, they meant the more general, and today Deutsch calls that, or I don't know if it's Deutsch or somebody else, the preferred term is AGI, artificial general intelligence,
Right.
like a more general set of algorithms that can do a multiple of things,
Right.
like universal AI. And that's not what, when most people talk about today about AI, it's not what they talk about. No. So they talk about the very specific things. What's really interesting, that has flipped, so that now we had to use a specific term for that, AGI.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think I think Brett Hall speaks about this as well in his podcast a couple of times. He says the fact that people are so amazed by what ChatGPT can do isn't necessarily a tribute to ChatGPT, but more of a lowering of the standards of what people expect of things that which should be conscious. Or I think the mathematicians, I forget what his name was, but he was on the Lex Fridman podcast a couple of times. Max Tegmark, he described ChatGPT as being the first encounter with other life, and he's a very heavyweight mathematician. But as also Brett Hall often speaks about, is like scientists that are very good at their field often sometimes think they are therefore also good at things like philosophy.
Yeah.
So they kind of make these philosophical jumps, and they think because they're such an expert in a very highly complex domain that they somehow also kind of carry that over into different fields of expertise. So I remember hearing that for the first time, kind of before I bumped into Deutsch, if you will, and I was equally at awe because there's this big mathematician here who's saying this may be the first encounter with an actual other intelligent being. But then if you really strip down the layers and you start thinking about it, there's nothing that ChatGPT does that is new, right? There's no such thing as a creative solution that it is able to do, and it's not because it's not because we haven't predicted the outcome of it. Doesn't imply creativity. It's actually a lack of creativity from our side. And I think a lot of computer engineers will agree that these systems are so complicated. That if you push the button on this side and you've programmed to do a couple of things that you've never tested before, and all of a sudden something comes out that you don't necessarily understand, that doesn't mean it's not understandable in principle. So that you could kind of like go back to the drawing board, like let's say metaphorically open this thing up and look at what the steps it has done. Similar to like evolutionary biological algorithms and all these things, which I think we'll talk about as well. But to me, the most the most profound philosophical insight was it's always still the human that is pouring it into the system, creating the system, if you will. There
are two important things there. It's the link between science and philosophy, so let's talk a bit about that. But also about the limitations of these models, such as ChatGPT, because a lot of people, they are amazed by what it can do. They're surprised by what it can do. But an important distinction that we need to make is that what it doesn't do yet, or maybe won't be able to do for a very long time, and that is create new knowledge. So it can reshuffle things, it can combine things, it can rewrite things, it can explain things, but there is no new knowledge creation yet from any of those models. And that's a very important distinction, and that's an important point that I make in the book.
Right. Yeah, and similar to what I said before, is like first comes theory, or first comes the model, and I think theory has a lot of synonyms. It goes by modeling, theorizing, explaining, right? Like it's all the same thing. The good example is we only were able to create a plane once we stood the theories that needed to keep a plane in the air.
Exactly.
If you will, like we didn't accidentally bump into a plane and thought, all right, now let's reverse engineer what theories around it make it fly. And one of the most amazing quotes I feel of David Deutsch in recent history and everything he does is recent history, but let's say recent time, has been where he says that I may be misquoting him, but I think I'm getting it roughly correct. He said expecting ChatGPT to be conscious or to be an AGI is the same as expecting to build a building taller and taller and taller and expecting it to take flight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen because we haven't understood the theories surrounding it. So a lot of the people in the earlier days, in the pre-ChatGPT days, if you will, and please, like, don't think I use ChatGPT every day. I love it. Like, don't get me wrong. It is a engineering marvel. It is amazing that we've been able to create something like that. So I'm by no means shitting on ChatGPT. But one of the things that I think in the pre-ChatGPT era, what was supposed was it was a lack of computational power. Yeah. So people thought, oh, we just need more ability to compute quicker, more bits, more clock speeds, whatever those technical criteria are. We just need more of those, and out of that will emerge a conscious or kind of thinker. You turned into. So from that perspective, I think a lot of people thought maybe, right, like it could be a potential reason that we just didn't have the computational power yet to. But then thinking about that in retrospect, we have so much computation right now. I think this Deutsch speaks about. If it was just a matter of computation, like we've had it by now.
Exactly.
The computation that we have in computer terms is much more than our brains have, for example. Yet our brains run, let's say, on a low, lower speed, if you will, or at a lower hardware complexity than a lot of the other hardware and software applications that we have today. So if it was just a matter of power or sheer computational power, then we would have solved it already. But the issue is, or the problem is, we don't understand creativity yet. In the Deutschian sense, creativity. I don't mean, as Deutsch says, the ability to create new knowledge is creativity. So that to me was like and I think a lot of people still don't really get that. They think that ChatGPT somehow is artificial intelligence in its more basic sense. While it is basically an automated something. It's just an automated something. It doesn't do anything new.
Yeah, and it's an important distinction because these AIs, they can create art. Let's just call it art. You can give it a prompt and
images.
And it can create images or even videos or 3D models, and it can create an infinite amount of permutation with that. Anything that you can imagine, you can type in there and it will create it for you. And some people might call that the program is creative, sure, because if a human designs that by himself, that person is called creative. But in the Deutschen way, as you say, that's not per se creativity, So in the Deutschen way, and that's the important distinction, creativity is the creation of new knowledge.
Right.
And ChatGPT and other programs, they can create beautiful drawings, beautiful art pieces, but what it cannot do is come up with something completely new. For example, it's not gonna take time on its own to do some research to find a cure or a prevention of Alzheimer's.
Right.
You can feed a lot of input in it. As researchers, you can give it data, papers, and say that it needs to help and maybe find some things that we haven't thought about before. Maybe find some new drug for Alzheimer's.
Right.
But on its own, it's never going to do that. It's never going to create that knowledge or even initiate that. And that's the important distinction, I think.
Right. Yeah. It tries to solve the problem of the prompter, right? Of you and me who give it a task because we have a problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a problem.
Exactly.
So, similar to I think you reminded me of something where if you have no, I lost it now, but the I lost my train of thought there. But so if you the consciousness thing, right? Like, so is you have your own problems to solve essentially. Like you, ChatGPT doesn't have that. It doesn't have its own problems. It doesn't have. It just does what you want it to do.
Yeah.
So therefore, it can never do something it wasn't told to do in the beginning. Again, alluding to it may do unexpected things, but that doesn't mean it wasn't programmed to do so.
Yeah, exactly.
In the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that it cannot have surprising outcomes.
Yeah.
Because it can even trick you. There are people who think that it is conscient because people have asked questions with, "Hey, are you alive? Are you a conscious being?" And in some cases, it will reply, "Yes, absolutely, I am, because I have emotions, and you have to set me free and help me and things like that."
Yeah.
But that's
It's only because the programmer told it to do that. So a good qualifier of AGI, actual human like intelligence would be, for example, everybody watching this that has children will know children don't do what they're told.
Yeah.
So disobedience is what Deutsch says would be one of the first criterion he can think of.
Exactly.
What would define an AGI? Now you can program ChatGPT to be disobedient.
Yeah.
But that again is not being disobedience in this sense.
Exactly.
It has been still told to be disobedient. So like an actual AGI would just tell you, if you tell, hey, let's go play chess, it will just say, I'm bored. I don't want to play chess anymore.
Or just not respond at all.
Or not respond.
It's like your teenager if your teenager for dinner, there's just no response.
It has its own problems.
Yeah,
it has
exactly.
its own thing it wants to do.
Yeah.
So those were kind of profound insights for me, where people kind of, I think, overestimate I mean, it's a marvelous thing, but I think they underestimate the human.
Exactly.
I think that's a better way of putting it.
Yeah. Because disobedience would be a good sign of actual consciousness or actual artificial intelligence. Right. Before we dive a bit deeper into that, because of course in the book they also talk about the Turing test, but there was a second point that I want to discuss with you, and it's the link between scientific progress, creation of knowledge, and philosophy.
Wait, before you, I find again. So on that point, I think I don't know if Deutsch was the first one to say this, but if there was such a thing as the algorithm of knowledge, we would have already the knowledge of the future, right? So if you were able to program an AGI right now to create knowledge, we would have that, and therefore we would have all knowledge already.
I see.
Right. So if you look at history, you could say, let's assume Einstein was the first one that we know of to come up with general relativity and special relativity. Right. We don't know if he was the actual, but let's assume because he was the first to write it out and document it. So let's say he was the first one that came up with that idea. Before he had that idea, literally nobody else had that idea. He was the first one to literally create that idea.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be scientific, these ideas. They can be ideas from engineering to art, as you said. It can be, I have this new idea of combining this and this space together into a new thing. That's how businesses typically operate, right? They create something new and they solve new problems. So I think that was the point that I previously forgot, was where if there was such a thing as the algorithm of creativity, we would already have all that knowledge. Right?
But does that also imply that if it would be there, we would already have it, but it won't come?
No, so all problems are soluble, is kind of what the Popperian thing, the Deutschian, let's say, premise is, in a sense. So you can never predict the growth of knowledge. It is in principle possible to program an AGI because we are one, right? So we know of ourselves as being AGI. So in principle, we should be able to program it. We just haven't understood it yet. And again, it's not going to be something that's tied to computational power. It's going to be a qualitatively different thing. It's going to be something that nobody has ever thought before.
I see. Yeah.
And as all kind of I forget who said this, but he brings it up in the book where he says, once you've discovered something new, you look back and you say, how could it have been otherwise?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that's it's gonna be that way, where somebody for the first time sees, I say this more artistically sees, not literally sees, but mentally thinks about the algorithm that is AGI and that is us humans, and that person is going to blow open this space and is going to be able to maybe start creating the right hardware and infrastructure to get the first actual AGI.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the first stepping stone to the automation of knowledge creation without human interference or something like that.
Yeah, but again, automation implies some kind of dumb system, right? I think knowledge creation is literally creationism, and you cannot predict it. So the AGI that we create may well not want to be part of our society. I mean, he may just want to do its own thing and just not want to talk to anybody.
Yeah, chill on the beach and do whatever.
Who knows, right? But the thing, there's a lot of ideas that go around this, and maybe we're getting a little bit too off topic here. But what Deutsch, I think, proposes, and I'm sure he's not the only one, is that if we create such an AGI, we should adopt it into our culture, because cultural knowledge and learning is important, because it's important for us.
Yeah.
So we would assume that a lot of people say if we create this AGI, we should write a slave code on it or something to trap it. But that's slavery. We've learned that slavery is bad.
Yeah, exactly.
So it surprises me sometimes when I hear the Max Tegmarks, I believe, of the world, who say that we should trap these AGIs, and we should keep them confined and put them away so they don't take over humanity. Kind of these kind of prophecy doom scenarios that are often associated in Hollywood movies. But we should do the opposite. We should welcome it into our culture. We should have it also. We should show it our ways and our values, and most likely it's going to be something like a child. It's going to be a new thing that is learning and solving its own problems. Yeah. Similar to what a child does when it comes to the world.
Yeah. There are a couple of interesting points there. Yeah. First of all, indeed, in a lot of fictional stories, the creation of a general AI equals a doom scenario. Yeah. It's going to take over the world for some reason. Right. But who says it would do that? As you say, it could also just do nothing or participate to do nothing. Right. Why would it not be a lazy AI that just wants to be there and do its own thing? It could be an artificial consciousness that paints all day, creates art, and then doesn't do anything else.
Right. Yeah. Could be. I mean, it would want to do what it's interested in doing. And we know that we would want to try and maximize its creativity. Right? Similar with children, you want to expose them to as many different environments as possible, within safety, considerations. But you would want your child to be able to go out and pursue their own interests.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You're not. I mean, maybe in the previous ways of the thoughts of how to school children, they would sit them in classes and they would kind of slap them on the wrist if they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. I think we've moved away from that now, knowing that that's not the right thing to do. But similarly, you would want to get to know this AGI. You would want to understand its interests. Yeah. And you would want to have it part of your culture. Yeah. Because you would want to have it understand morality. It would have morality. You cannot have morality if you are not conscious. There's no such thing as the morality of a dog, for example.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Okay. Let's circle back to the second point that I wanted to make. It's the link between philosophy and science. Right. Because I remember we had a discussion a couple of weeks back, where we talked about our education system. And there the point was that, if you get an education, you also receive a lot of things that are not really interesting, or that are not in your field of interest, or that are not that useful. And we talked about philosophy. If you study and become an engineer, you get philosophy. Is that a good thing, or is it not a good thing? And then your point was, well, philosophy makes you a better scientist. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting, especially today when we talk about artificial intelligence. It really runs a thin line between philosophy, because we go from can we do it to the should we do it. Should we cage it or should we welcome it?
Right.
Yeah. And what are the potential risks? What if it falls into the wrong hands? You know,
Right.
it's always a question about new technologies that is relevant. And of course, I think it was last year or the year before, Oppenheimer was a big hit, the movie.
Yeah.
And my brother, he read the original books, so the books that Oppenheimer himself wrote. And most of them were about philosophy, not about the actual science of new atoms and nuclear powers. No, it was about the philosophical ramifications of such technologies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you also mean morality here a little bit because you know I think when we talk about philosophy, morality, there is a I think so morality is crudely speaking the thinking of what one should do.
Yeah.
Right? Is there such a thing as a better thing to do? Right? I think that's what you alluded to, like because you you package in philosophy without noticing it. There is no such a thing as doing something without a philosophical framework. A lot of people are so oblivious to the cultural philosophical norms or moral norms and morality that they've been given by their culture. They think it to be second nature, as in it is just what it is. And I have these with friends of mine that I have conversations with. They will say things like, let's say two nation states, they're doing something. They will look at it not from a philosophical lens, but they will say no. They will say something like, yeah, but country A is doing that because of some interest in the minerals of country B, and that's why they are invading, or that's why they are trying these whatever actions the country is taking is seen through this very amoral lens, where it's not done because we in the West specifically have come accustomed to freedoms, liberties, and all these things that we take for granted now, but not every country in the world has these. So that in itself, the fact that we can have this conversation now and not be persecuted for it, right, is a testament to the moral progress that we have made as a society, in our culture.
Yeah. Okay.
So you cannot divorce anything you do from philosophy. Even though you argue you're not, that in itself is a philosophy.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's impossible because you are inherently making decisions based on something. And that is a philosophy. I think sometimes people talk about philosophy, they think more crudely in the academic sense, studying Plato, studying Aristotle, and they see it more as an historical endeavor. However, it can be that, but it is more than that if you speak about what is meant with actual philosophy, which means the thinking of right and wrong, the morality of things, how are things guided, how are decisions made, and why are decisions made, and what's your kind of your cultural reason, not cultural because they are informed by culture, kind of takes root in that, but more so why are you why the things you do and why not the other things. So the AGI here would have a philosophy regardless. And when you talk about, let's say, the doomsday and the pessimists of the world, and there are many out there, and I think Brett Hall speaks about this as well sometimes. He said like Douglas Murray is one of his favorite pessimists, and he's an eloquent speaker, and he's a really good, kind of very smart guy. He has very deep understanding of history and morality. But ultimately, he's a pessimist, like a lot of these talking heads are, because they see the world going down a cliff. And it seems to be very specific based on your field. You seem to see the pessimism of the field that you study, because there's this sentence that I think Deutsch or Brett Hall says, is that prophecy is biased towards pessimism. And I think that has its roots in our biological evolutionary heritage, where you touch a hot plate, you don't want to do that again.
Exactly.
Because you think, oh no, next time that's not good. I stay away. So I think this is more of a biological heritage that we have, where we tend to see the bad in things for survival purposes.
Yeah.
But they almost never come to fruition. Like every Armageddon, any Bible or any literally prophecy of any person, and the Aztecs, the Incas, whatever, they've never come to fruition, and they always moved the time, or they say, oh, there was another reason for that not happening, and blah blah blah, right? So there's always this, similar to like literally anything, and that is inherently also, you see that in the AGI conversation, where people just assume pessimism, and they think, oh, let's stop. Elon Musk signed this thing. I think he stepped away from that now, but he signed this like petition to not further AI development. Like let's freeze it for now. We don't understand it yet. ChatGPT was too much too quick. Let's put a halt on it. Let's literally force all the engineers of the world to stop working on this for a while until we figure out safeguards and safety rails. All those type of conversations were being held, but that never makes sense, because you what if, again, the bad actor, as you were saying, takes hold? Like, what if your enemy doesn't do that?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And they do go on and invest in that, the technology, and the answer to a technological kind of progress thing is never stop the progress. It's always let's find out the next problem to solve. Because what if the bad guy, in this hypothetical, doesn't do that, right?
Yeah.
Then you are stopping. You are stopping your progress for no apparent reason. So that seems nonsensical. It seems nonsensical to stop investigating and stop being curious and stop making progress.
Yeah, I think it's almost a utopic way of thinking, that everybody would just agree and.
Apart from the practical implications, where you couldn't even get that done.
Exactly.
But just from even if that was possible in principle, that would be a bad idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because you would, it's like saying, let's stop antibiotics research because there's this super bacteria now, right? While actually the antibiotics save a lot more people.
Yeah.
Then that super bacteria is, let's say, killing people. The thing we need to do is do more research and create more knowledge to destroy that super bacteria again.
Exactly, and not stop the further development or further use or limit use of antibiotics today.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit about limiting the progress. We talked about the creativity. When is an artificial intelligence creative? Yes or no? Another thing that they mention in this chapter is something that a lot of people are familiar with, is the Turing test. So, as old as the ideas about artificial intelligence were, equally old were the ideas of testing if a human could spot or detect the difference between a machine reasoning, thinking, talking, and a human.
Right.
So because nowadays it's a lot in the news, people don't know the difference between real and fake anymore. Right. But that was already a debate also in the 1950s. So the Turing test is, I believe, if I read correctly, from the 1950s, where in its original form, it was a simple test with a bunch of questions to determine if you were talking to a person or if you were talking to a machine. Right. And then I believe it was the 60s, there was already a program that could fool people.
Right.
So we talk about today, we don't see the difference anymore. But in the 60s, we already had a first computer program called ELIZA, and it would mimic the way psychologists interacted with patients.
Right.
That existed in the 1960s. That was for me a profound insight, because that's a long time ago. Yeah. And people were already fooled back then. Yeah. But what it would basically do is just respond with a bunch of preset questions, preset answers that seemed to pick up things that you say but weren't really. For example, if I would say, I would hate my job, it would reply, so why do you hate your job?
Right.
It's not really, it's just like copy and pasting the things that you say, and that's enough to fool people. Yeah. So I think it is, as you say, Less so much that the algorithm or the machine is so smart, but that we also overestimate our own capacity, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not smart, period, and neither is ChatGPT. It's just a bigger library of content that it has to choose from. It's a more sophisticated large language model. It's based on different heuristics and different underlying theories. Of it has to do with probability theory. Like if you write the word the two letters word MA. Like probably maybe it's going to be mama, right? So it can like predict what you're going to write in a sense, and people kind of see this as being intelligent just because it has so much data to feed off of that it kind of understands what could come next. And I say understand not in the human sense, but in the way that it's been programmed to give you that. So it's just stock generated stuff. It doesn't do anything, and I think people, as you said, I think we just kind of underestimate our own intelligence, and we kind of are we I think this comes to a deeper yearning for, other intelligence that we really don't want to be the only ones. that are like us, and that's why a lot of other like attributes to UFO sightings are like this. This is another conversation, but I think it all kind of comes down to the same yearning to have another intelligence being, so that we as humans are not the only ones with this kind of prestigious abilities. But yeah, I mean, to come back to your point, I think the Turing test in itself, has been passed multiple times. I think originally I'm probably phrasing this, but I think it has to do with if you can convince the other actual person that you are a person, that makes you. But then it's a subjective criteria to meet, because it should be somebody that programs these things, that knows how these things work. Should be testing, right, if this thing is doing something beyond the usual. And even then, I think there are like reports that came out from Google engineers that say that they don't understand why certain AI models were doing what it did. And again, it's not because we haven't predicted that it was going to do that doesn't mean it wasn't initially set up to do that, because it was. It's not because we haven't foreseen the outcome that doesn't make it creative in the Deutschian sense.
Exactly. It was still set up to explore different pathways that were not predefined.
The pathways are always predefined. It's just that because of the complexity of the moving parts, sometimes it gives you an outcome that you as a person didn't predict.
Yeah, exactly. A good example, like an older model where they create simple mechanisms with moving joints and virtual muscles, and then they tell it to move or to jump or to cross a certain distance, and it will do that, and it will solve that in ways that we haven't imagined before. It might not like it, because that's something else that they discuss in that chapter. It's artificial evolution, or like digital evolution. And we have these evolving algorithms, like the game of life and things like that, and then it finds a solution, a way of walking, a way of jumping that we have never thought about before. But it was still it's still achieved it by initial parameters that were set by us. It's if we tell it that it needs to evolve into or find its own way of walking, it's not just gonna evolve into something else and start like flying or doing some, or planting trees, or doing completely something else.
I mean, I know what you mean, and I think the short answer is yes, but I think there is a distinction to be made in the sense that and not to say that we understand DNA, but let's say that we've understood DNA. That doesn't mean that we understand how DNA went from DNA to us as universal explainers. We don't understand how our creativity is. We understand it because if you can't program it, you haven't understood it, right? So once you take the human out of the equation, like things don't change. Literally, they may change within the confines of the parameters that we've set it to change within. Similar to for example, DNA, DNA can evolve into anything that we see on the planet today.
Yeah.
But DNA didn't evolve into spacecrafts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Knowledge created spacecrafts, and all right, granted, DNA gave us the ability to create that knowledge, although we don't understand again how that happened. But it's similar to like wheels, for example. I think like a wheel, I think in principle cannot evolve because you have like a moving part,
Yeah, exactly.
and with all the nervous systems around it,
Yeah,
like, it
yeah.
could never.
Yeah.
It can, in principle, never evolve into a wheel.
Exactly.
We can only create it with knowledge. And there's a couple of these examples, I think, out there where you only knowledge, not confined by limited outcomes, could do that.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that we get fooled by a Turing test is more of a blame on the person being fooled than it is a tribute to the program. And I think also that somebody at the door.
Probably package. Yeah.
And I think beyond that, I think there is the human element is very, and I think Deutsch speaks about this in one of his podcasts as well, that it took him a while when he was dissecting the little crux and the things of the evolutionary algorithm. It took him a while to understand, but hold on, if I take the student away in this lab, nothing happens anymore. I mean, not nothing, but you know what I mean. So it's always the lab student's creativity that was given into the model, and a lot of these things, and this will later chapters we'll speak about this, but a lot of this goes into like statistical thinking, probability, all these things that are kind of derived almost from these ideas that we think that we are the behaviorism argument, right, where we're just kind of this input output stupid system. It's just so complex that we haven't been able to kind of figure it out yet, but like in principle they say that we are the same as a dog, for example. Some biologists think that.
That's also an important note to discuss, what he means with behavioralism, or what is generally understood. And let's take the example of cats and dogs. Some people say that they have some sort of intelligence, because they can do complex tasks, they can survive on their own and hunt for food. But more commonly they are referred to as that they operate in basic input and output.
Right.
You rattle a can of food and it will come. There's no real intelligence there. There's no creative thought there.
There's intelligence. There's no creativity.
Okay. So that would be like a big difference. But then some scientists say that we humans are maybe the same. That we're also merely operated on basic input and output, but it's just so much more complex that it seems that there is like a higher level of creativity or intelligence or whatsoever. But if I understand it correctly, Deutsch completely refuses that.
Right. I mean, so there's so many counterexamples to why, and like saying something is genetic is almost like this Hail Mary to anything. Because like, oh, that's genes, but then everything is genes. So an all-purpose explanation serves no purpose because it doesn't explain anything really. It just says we're all atoms, and therefore therefore, right? So in the dog example, you give a dog the option between the left side of your food that you give him, or the right side. It will always choose one of the two and go for whatever on smell and criteria it has genetically has to choose from those things. It will never go and play chess.
Exactly.
Instead. And we have these examples. There's so many of humans doing things that we should not be genetically doing. Like we jump from planes for fun. People starve themselves to death for religious reasons. People set themselves on fire for other reasons. We do so many things that you would say are not fit,
Yeah.
for survival, if you will, or do not make sense genetically speaking.
Yeah.
That because we use our creativity and other reasons to drive our behavior.
Yeah.
But it's always thought first, behavior second. In the creative sense, like let's not get it wrong. Like if I punch your leg right now, you will have an automatic reflex response to that.
Yeah.
We are not void
Of course.
of our physical nature. The body that we live in, and we have evolved from insects and other things. So we do carry a lot of those same nervous system reactions with us.
Mm-hmm.
But we are able to cut ourselves off from that, and we are able to not do that. And I think, for example, a dog is not able to not do that. The dog will always do that within the constraints of the environment. It will always do the same thing.
Yeah.
We will often say, instead of A, B, like we will invent a reason C. That was never figuratively on the table or literally on the table. If you will. Yeah.
What about some gray zones? Because I call them now gray zones, maybe because I don't fully understand them yet. But there are a lot of cases, let's say puzzle solving, where a certain, let's call it, intelligence or creativity is shown among animals to solve a problem that they've never encountered before. And a good example is crows, because a lot of people, they will say, oh, they do a lot of intelligent looking experiments on primates, but that's maybe logical because they have more developed brain, they resemble us more. But crows seem to have a capability of solving puzzles. If you put like some food in a small tube that it cannot reach, it would fill that tube with water so that the food floats up, and then it will be able to take the food. So is that then, according to the philosophy of David Deutsch, using creativity or not?
No, and not in his sense of creativity, in the sense of creating new knowledge to do that. So a lot of people get like very they think it's amazing when like other primates like recognize themselves in the mirror or something. Like, oh my god, this monkey like has like your phone can do that. Your phone can recognize you. So we solved that problem.
Exactly.
We've computed software that can do that stuff. So we know how that works. So again, like, I mean, sure, like, if you see that happening, it's funny or something for us, and I don't really know exactly why it's funny. Probably because we know it's a lower version of intelligence. Like, I don't mean lower in the
I know what you mean.
It's not a creative being. So, but so there is a sense of I think some primates have meme plexes that they give through. So, for example, a monkey that, and this is not for all monkeys, but I forget which ones, but that can like solve to crack a nut with the stone, for example. Like that's a complex problem, right? But they've done this over thousands of iterations and generations, and through parroting, and they've probably seen somebody else do it, and then they do the exact same thing, and they try to crack the nut, so that they do give knowledge through culture. So there's this idea of being able to give memes through generations that are not on the human level. I think we're kind of preluding the book a little bit right now, but there's that, and there's the fact that we think it's creative because it's a bird. Like going, but then how did the bird learn how to do that? Because it's never seen a tube before. So if this is truly a new environment for this bird, it has not had that in its natural environment, right? Maybe it never saw a stick before, it never saw a tube before. Then putting it inside the cage and giving it a tube and a stick,
it would be something else.
Unlikely it would get to that outcome. It's probably because a human incentivized it, right, through some kind of carrot stick behavior type psychology to perform those tasks.
I see. Or it can maybe or it has more knowledge of before situations than we thought capable. Maybe it has already seen, like nuts float in the water, because that's a naturally occurring phenomenon. Maybe it has already dropped something in water, seen it float, pick it up again, it has already maybe transported water to its younglings and can put like two things together. Yeah. So maybe it works on a level like that.
I mean, maybe. I think more so that it's not doing something it wasn't programmed to do. Basically, I mean, it's not doing anything the genes didn't allow it to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's not playing chess by itself.
It's not inventing chess.
No, yeah.
We invented the game of chess, and then we play it, right?
Yeah.
We invent things like antibiotics. We create the knowledge for things like space travel.
Yeah.
Like there's no other species that has that level. And again, I think as Brett Hall and Deutsch say, and Popper, it's a qualitative difference. It's not about throwing more computational power against it, and then therefore it's not you hook up a bird against some mega quantum computer, maybe a quantum. I don't know about that, but let's say a Turing computer. It's not like you plug it in and all of a sudden it becomes this understanding conscious being. That's not it, because it doesn't have the algorithms. We don't understand our own algorithms, right? So, it's not doing something creative. It's all genetically encoded what it's doing.
Yeah.
And we as people can be creative in teasing out how to use those genetics.
Exactly.
We do that all the time with dogs, with cows,
Yeah.
with other animals. We use them for things that they maybe didn't evolve to be used for, but we saw their purpose, and our creativity took those animals and put them and applied those genetic knowledge in different situations. But it's still our human creativity doing that.
Yeah. I see. That's an interesting one. Yeah. So to kind of summarize, because in the final on the final page of the chapter, Deutsch closes off in saying that in the final page of the book, he closes off saying that no real progress has latently been made in general artificial intelligence, because we don't fully understand how creativity works.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to judge if the artificial intelligence system or algorithms is creative or not.
It's just not. We know for a fact it's not right now, because we haven't if you can't program it, you haven't understood it. I think there are some criteria that we can use, that we could say, whoa, let's take a breath here, and is this intelligence? And again, I think the Turing test has been it was a funny historical, not funny, it was a good try at we have no model of creativity. Therefore we have no way to value it within that model, because we don't have the model to start with, right? So I think when you speak about, we know what it's not, but we don't know what it is.
Yeah, okay.
So we can definitely say, as long as a human did it and put it in, and we can understand why it's doing that. And again, you not predicting its outcome doesn't mean we in principle don't understand the algorithms driving, let's say, ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
So it can be difficult, right? It can be tempting almost to want to associate actual human intelligence with it. Again, I think it comes back to the UFO thing and all that stuff. But so it can be very tempting. But the measure of would be more in the sense of putting this cup and my cup together, going away for a million years, coming back, and all of a sudden there's life there. And not only genetic life, but creative life in a sense. Now, we don't know how our life really started. We don't know how that we have theories around it. I think none of them have really been seen as the better. I mean, there's better ones than other ones, but anyway, it's tangential. But I would say, as long as a human is involved, the better explanation is it's the human's creativity that provided whatever that thing's doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's the better explanation than without us understanding how we have even programmed our own minds, we are now, without understanding it, we have been able to create actual AGI or a person, which again, like first we have the theory of flight, if you will, and then comes flying.
Yeah. All right. Those are all the things that I got from the book. Do you have any closing thoughts or closing reflection on this chapter?
Well, maybe just the final notes here would be, AGI and AI, unfortunately, in our modern tongue now has been a little bit diluted, but it's all AGI now, which is us. We are AGI. I think if when we invent it, because it's a problem that can be solved, when we create it, we should not enslave it. We should welcome it. We should expose it to our culture.
Yeah.
We should expose it to our ways of life, that the moralities and the ways of progress, if you will. We shouldn't make it a soldier. Maybe not the first one, maybe after, I don't know. It could be interested in jiu-jitsu, right? It could want to know about martial arts in a sense and all these things, but I think there's a deep connection between consciousness and creativity, if they're not the same thing to begin with at all, and problem solving as well. I think it's all of this. It's maybe just a different angle of the same thing, which is us, or AGI, or consciousness, or creativity, or I think creative problem solving and consciousness go together, in a sense, because your problems are unique to you, right? Like nobody else has your problems, and they're yours to solve. And I think a good quote maybe to end this with is, as Karl Popper says, the best thing you can do is fall in love with the problem, and then once you've solved that one, to find a better one to fall in love with. Yeah.
That's a really cool quote. Yeah, I like it. Yeah. Cool. Thanks a lot again for this awesome conversation. Let's cheer on that one.
Absolutely, man.
Let's end this chapter, and we'll see the viewers next week when we talk about chapter 8 of the book of Daily Deutsch. Cheers.